Hello, everybody. Okay, today's topic is one that I wasn't planning on doing, but I saw a couple of comments on LinkedIn today, and it's something that's occurred to me as well. And so I figured it's time to address it, and that is deceptive marketing practices. Marketing has a long history of deceptive practices and advertising and false advertising. It's something people have always known. People have always been hesitant about marketing and advertising due to the history of deception occurring. And it's sad. And honestly, it's shameful. Anyone who's doing it needs to understand that deceptive marketing practices will never win. The specific one that I've run into a number of times, and I saw posts on LinkedIn about it today, and this is something that I had never seen until fairly recently, and I've now run into it, I think, 3 times in the past, probably 3 months alone, and that is getting, outreach from someone either via email or via direct message on LinkedIn, and they lead with either, "Hey, are you gonna join the meeting?" when you never scheduled a meeting, or saying, "Hi, following up from our last conversation, XYZ." Well, the first time it happened to me, I took a pause because the first time it happened, it was a direct message via LinkedIn. And the message was, "Hey, following up from our last conversation, I was wondering if you had a chance to," I don't remember exactly what it was, but love to jump on a call. Oh, do you have time tomorrow at 2 o'clock? And your initial instinct, your initial reaction is to go, "Oh, I totally forgot about this. Let me, schedule the meeting, say yes, sure, no problem, and I'll figure out what it was." But I something felt off about it, and I get lots of messages, and it just didn't ring a bell. So I decided to look into it. I looked up the person, I looked up my emails, I did some searching. I wasted probably a solid 15 minutes of my time to only realize that I had never been in contact with this person ever before. And I found that odd and I just ignored it. Well, then it happened again. The next time it was a little different. It was a, "Hey, are you still ready for our meeting tomorrow?" And I once again had the same reaction. This is probably a couple months after the first time I had the same reaction. That was, "I don't remember having a meeting scheduled." Well, what it turns out is that this is a fairly common tactic being used by shady marketers. It's a deceptive marketing practice. And what people are doing is they are leading with saying that you missed something or you've already agreed to something or you've scheduled something, etc., to compel you to then follow through. And it's incredibly deceptive. Now, I don't understand why they do this, how it works, because I would think the moment you get on, unless they can play a good con and truly convince you, you're going to realize you've never spoken to them before, you hadn't had these previous interactions they reference, and you're going to say, "Wait a minute, what's going on here?" And unless they either have the greatest product ever, which they obviously don't, otherwise they wouldn't be using deceptive marketing to get in front of you anyways, um, I'm assuming people are going to shut them down. So it made me think about it, go, okay, why then are people doing this if all it's going to do is piss people off? And what I realized, I think it's even more sinister than I had thought in the first place. I think what they're doing is they're actually preying on people who don't have the mental fortitude or the gumption to speak up for themselves. I think they're preying on the pushovers. And what they're doing is they're getting people who are too afraid to call them out on their bullshit to buy into it. And then my guess is if you do jump on the call, they then hit you with a series, would be my assumption, of strong armed sales tactics to try to convince you or con you into making a purchase of some sort on what is completely a fraudulent basis. So I want to talk about this because one, it won't work. If you're thinking about doing these things, I would assume no one in my audience ever would. But if you are, give it up. But two is it gives all marketing a bad name. It perpetuates the negative stereotypes and it makes it tougher for everyone else who's doing things legitimately. When you lead to someone with, "Hey, following up from our last conversation," yet that conversation never existed, you are starting your relationship on a lie. And I don't know about all of you, but I've never had a relationship that's started with lies, be anything other than a relationship of lies. And there's no success in that. And the second reason I wanted to bring this up is as a warning to all you good people out there, watch out for the scams. It might be 2025, yet the scams seem to be becoming more prevalent now than I've actually seen them over the past 15 years. And I think part of it might be the rise of AI, and I think a lot of these are probably automated. They're probably bot driven. My guess is the person on the other end of the communique does not actually exist. It's most likely a bot writing these messages. And then when someone does follow up, it probably runs through an automated process until a meeting gets scheduled, at which point a real person will show up to then continue the con, but it's just a con. So be careful. If you're looking at your DMs, you're looking at your emails, and you have people leading with, hey, I wanted to follow up on our meeting we had scheduled, or I wanted to follow up on our previous conversation, or hey, I was wondering if you were still interested in XYZ, or I've even had some so bold as to say, I remember you asked me for this. Think twice, double check, and look into it because there's a decent chance it's a scam. And once again, I didn't realize just how prevalent it was, other than the 3, 4 instances I've had over the last number of months, and various times throughout the years beyond that. I mean, it's probably happened over a dozen times over the years, but it seems to be getting more prevalent. So, mostly want to throw this out as a word of watch out for deceptive marketing practices. It used to be deceptive marketing practices were things like pitching a product is one thing, yet it's actually another. On the lower end of the scale, they'll say made in USA when it's actually made in China. Made in China when it's made in Taiwan. Whatever it may be, those are all deceptive marketing practices, and none of them are good. None of them are a sustainable strategy, and none of them are going to work because cheaters never prosper. Something I learned as a kid, and it's always held true. You might get away with it once or twice, but you're going to get caught. And when you do, well, it's going to be everywhere from a bad taste in the mouth for people who, don't take action, and a damage to an entire industry to, depending on the context in which you're cheating, you always end up with good old fashioned street justice to be worried about. Why is this rise coming up now? Once again, as I said, I think a lot of it has to do with automation. I think a second part of why we're seeing more of it is we receive more communications now than ever before. I don't know about you, but hundreds of emails a day is not a strange thing. Dozens of direct messages and social media platforms is not a strange thing. And I think a lot of these people are just hoping to get lost in the chaos, lost in the weeds, to where nobody actually ever looks at and verifies it and then they get you on, they con you to convince you that you had already done something. And most professionals are incredibly busy. And my guess is a lot of them, do get away with it. Otherwise, they wouldn't be doing it. Wouldn't be a tactic or a strategy used. Well, here's the warning to all you out there. Watch out for scams. They are alive and well. And as I said, they seem to be getting more prevalent. With AI and with bots, you're seeing more and more of them. Now, interestingly, bots aren't necessarily a scam. I've run into bots before where I've had a conversation with someone over a DM, but it was a good pitch, a good outreach. Wasn't um, in any way deceptive. And I've started a conversation with what I didn't know at the time, although I suspected, I actually later determined were bots. And it had a conversation that led to a meeting. And then there was the bait and switch involved. I went from the person I was speaking with, which was actually a bot, and then ended up speaking to a real human at the end. And that didn't particularly bother me too much because, once again, the conversation that I had with the bot, well, unbeknownst to me at the time, I was speaking to a bot, was a legitimate conversation on a legitimate topic, and it legitimately drove my interest to the point where I did schedule a meeting. And when I had the conversation, I had actually gone back and I had looked through the chat history um, leading up to the meeting, and I thought it might be a bot. And so I just directly confronted the person on the call. I said, by the way, in the lead up to this, the conversation, and mind you, I believe there was 4 or 5 direct messages back and forth. followed up by 2 emails by me, 3 by them. I called them out. I said, "Hey, have I been talking to a human or have I been talking to a bot all along?" And I laid out some different points of the communications that made me suspect that it was a bot I was talking to, not a person. And mind you, this was a very good one, but I still caught it. And they said, yes, it was. And then we ended up having about a 20-minute conversation actually about the bots they were using, the tools, and the advantages. Well, there's nothing wrong with bots per se, but even then, be careful. If you're using bots and you're not disclosing, if people aren't aware that they're talking to a bot, that's going to rub a lot of people the wrong way too. The only reason it didn't bother me so much here is one, I did detect it, and two, when I asked him about it, he was just completely upfront about it, and I was able to learn something new about the industry, etc. So if you're using bots, be careful how you use them. Avoid deception. Deceptive marketing practices aren't going to work long term. You might get away with it once or twice, but it's never going to last. And be straightforward with your audience. Nobody wants to feel like they got duped, whether or not you do anything legally wrong, ethically wrong, morally wrong. Nobody ever wants to feel duped. So be very, very careful if you're using bots to make sure that you're not deceiving your audience in a way that they are going to end up with a bad taste in their mouth because you're going to lose the business before you ever get a chance to even pitch it. Today, as I said, I saw an article on LinkedIn on this very topic. And their case was a little more drastic. It was someone who led with the following up type thing. And then when they were challenged on it, it turned actually more negative. It became a thing of the person on the other end, then led into direct attacks and then blocking. And it turns out there's a number of stories that started popping up in the comments that it turns out lots and lots of people are dealing with this issue. It's becoming more and more prevalent, especially in places like LinkedIn. And then I said also via email. So once again, when you get a message that leads with a follow up, take the time to look back and see if there actually was a conversation in the first place. Because once again, when you're busy, as I know quite frequently, you don't remember every conversation you have. You don't remember every single person you spoke to. And if they're referencing something that was a month or 2 or 3 back, you might just go, oh, yeah, that sounds familiar and dive right in. Well, watch out because turns out there's a decent chance you're getting scammed. So once again, the moral of the story, deceptive marketing practices will never win. Think of this as a PSA to all you good people out there. Be on the lookout for it. And to all you assholes out there, cut the shit. We're tired. Have a great day. God bless, and I'll talk to you all tomorrow. Bye bye.